Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. I grabbed Evan's phone off the counter and hit call back. My thumb slipped once and I nearly dropped it. Evan lunged for it like it was a weapon. Miles looked up and his face tightened fast. I'm Kara, 29, and I knew I crossed a line. Not gonna lie, I did it anyway. I held the phone behind my back and kept my voice steady. Evan's jaw jumped, and that told me plenty. What are you doing? His hand shot out, palm up. Checking something. I kept my eyes on Miles instead. Miles's fingers pinched the strap on his bag hard. He always does that when adults start circling. Evan stepped closer and blocked Miles from my view. That move felt intentional, and it made me angry. I leaned sideways to keep Miles in sight. Evan's shoulders stayed stiff, like he practiced this. I lowered the phone and tried to reset the moment. Did the school call you again? My voice came out thin. Evan smiled without warmth and tapped the counter twice. That little rhythm hit my nerves like a warning. He didn't answer my question, which was the answer. Instead, he stared at Miles, then stared at me. You need to stop. His tone stayed flat and sharp. I blinked like an idiot, waiting for the rest. Stop what? I heard myself ask too fast. Evan pointed at Miles's lunchbox with one finger. You packing his food? He didn't look at Miles once. Miles swallowed like he wanted to disappear. I set the lunchbox down and lifted my hands. Okay, I tried to make it sound calm. Evan exhaled through his nose like I finally behaved. That reaction lit something hot in my chest. He took one step back and delivered it clean. You are not his mother, he said it like policy. My mouth opened and nothing useful came out. Miles's eyes snapped to mine, wide and wet. I forced a small laugh because I panicked. It came out shaky and wrong, like a bad cover. Evan didn't flinch, which made it worse. He watched me like he wanted me to crack. I knelt in front of Miles and touched his shoulder lightly. He didn't pull away, but he didn't lean in either. That pause wrecked me more than yelling ever could. Have you ever felt a kid hesitate on you? Evan shifted and cut the space between us again. You're confusing him. His finger hovered near Miles's head. I stood up fast and my chair scraped loud. Miles jerked at the sound and Evan didn't care. Don't talk about him like he's a problem. My voice rose, then I dragged it back down. Evan's eyes flicked toward the hallway, then back. That glance told me this was not just a fight. Miles whispered my name, barely audible. I turned to him and my throat tightened hard. Evan moved his hand toward the door lock. That tiny motion made my skin go cold. Why are you doing this right now? I asked. Evan kept his hand on the lock like a threat. You've had your role. He didn't blink once. I stared at his fingers and I finally understood the setup. I reached for Miles and Evan snapped, don't. Not a shout, more like a command. Miles flinched and clutched his bag strap again. Then Evan added one more line and it landed like a punch. She's coming back, he said it softly like mercy. I slammed my laptop shut, then opened it again. My hands kept doing that like it could change reality. I signed into Miles's school account and held my breath. A new banner sat at the top and it wasn't friendly. It read account access updated in plain language. No explanation, no warning, just a timestamp. My stomach flipped like I missed a step on stairs. I clicked it anyway because I had to. The page loaded slow, then snapped into place. Under Guardians, my name wasn't there. One empty space sat where I used to be listed. My pulse started punching behind my eyes. I refreshed once, then again, then again. Nothing changed except the timestamp on my panic. You know that moment when you start bargaining with a screen. I hated myself for doing it, and I kept doing it. I went to the emergency section and scrolled fast. A number showed up that I didn't recognize at all. It had a label next to it, and that label stung. Mother sat there like a brand. I whispered no way and covered my mouth. The sound still came out thin and sharp. I stared at the word until my vision blurred. Then I saw a second change and it got worse. My name still existed in the system, just demoted. It sat under authorized pickup with a tiny note. The note said conditional, like I was unsafe. My fingers went numb as I read it. I tried to click for details, but it locked me out. A little pop-up asked for a code I never had. That's when the fear turned into something colder. Someone planned this with steps. I grabbed my cell and checked my messages. There was a new notification from the school app. It thanked the primary guardian for updating contacts. That line felt like a slap across my face. I tapped the notification and it opened a short log. It listed a change request, then an approval. The approval name was Evans, bold and clean. I sat there staring at his signature like it was a crime scene. I marched into the bedroom and flipped the light on. Evan groaned and dragged a pillow over his head. "Wake up," my voice sounded steadier than I felt. He didn't move, which told me he already knew. I shoved the screen in front of his face. "Explain this," my finger hovered over the word conditional. Evan blinked once, then looked past me at the wall. That dodge made my skin crawl. "It's paperwork," he muttered, then rolled to the edge. He rubbed his forehead like I was a headache. "Don't make this bigger," his tone stayed casual and cruel. I felt my control start slipping. "Bigger than being erased," I heard myself snap. Evan sat up and finally met my eyes. "This is what's best," he kept his voice low, almost gentle. That fake softness made me want to scream. I stepped back because I didn't trust my hands. My chest tightened like a belt pulling hard. "I'm on his file," I tried to keep it factual. Evan's mouth twitched like he almost smiled. "You were on his file," he lifted one finger, correcting me. Then he pointed at the door like he was directing traffic. "Go to sleep," he said it like I was being dramatic. I stood there and I realized I was being managed. I walked out and shut the door without a sound. In the hallway, I opened the app again, hunting for more. Another section showed a scheduled meeting at the school. I didn't recognize the attendee name and my throat tightened. The attendee was listed as M. Hart with a new email. No last-minute notice, no message to me, just arranged. My brain tried to guess who she was and failed. Then my screen lit up with a fresh alert and it finished me. It was an invitation to a reunification plan call. Tomorrow early, marked as required. I stared at it until my eyes burned. Because the call wasn't for me, it was about me. I tapped join on the call invite, then stopped mid-breath. My finger hovered like it might burn. I backed out and forwarded the invite to myself. I needed a trail because someone already built one. I walked into the living room and kept my voice level. "Who is M. Hart?" My phone stayed flat in my palm. Evan didn't look up, just lifted one shoulder. That shrug felt like a door locking. "Don't start this again," Evan rubbed his eyes hard. I stepped closer until he finally had to see me. "I'm already out of the school file," my words came out clipped. His face tightened for half a second, then went blank. He reached for my phone and I pulled it back. "No," one clean syllable, and it surprised us both. Evan's hand froze in the air, then dropped. Miles shuffled at the hallway edge, listening without meaning to. I lowered my voice and pointed toward Miles with my chin. Not in front of him, my throat felt tight and dry. Evan flicked his eyes toward Miles, then away fast. That quick check told me he knew it was ugly. I guided Miles toward his room with 2 fingers. "Hey buddy, give me 5 minutes, I kept my smile thin. Miles nodded, but his eyes stayed glued to Evan. He closed his door slow, like he expected it to swing back open. The second that door clicked, Evan stood up fast. "You're making him anxious," his hands cut the air once. I stared at him because the nerve was unreal. "You did this," I shot back and my voice cracked. Evan took his phone from his pocket and angled it away. He tapped the screen with practice speed. I saw a name flash before he turned it fully. A woman's first name, and it hit like ice. I stepped into a space and held my hand out. "Show me," my palm stayed open like I was begging. Evan's lips pressed into a line, then he pocketed the phone. That move told me he had more to hide. I went straight for the only leverage I had left. I opened the shared email folder on my laptop. I searched Hart and my hands shook while it loaded. A thread popped up and my chest went hollow. The subject line read, "Transition Schedule Draft." I clicked it and scrolled like my life depended on it. It wasn't just the school, there was a lawyer looped in. And Evan had replied with a smiley face. I read it again because my brain refused it. There were bullet points about reintroduction and boundaries. One line mentioned non-parent figure, and I tasted metal. That phrase was aimed at me, and it was deliberate. I heard Evan behind me and slammed the laptop half closed. He snatched it open again with a sharp motion. Stop snooping, his voice cut low, almost calm. I pointed at the email and didn't blink. You called me a non-parent, my voice shook then steadied. Evan spread his hands like a mediator on TV. That's legal language, he leaned on the back of the couch. I laughed once and it sounded mean. Legal for what? I asked and my stomach clenched. Evan looked toward the hallway, then lowered his voice. You were never supposed to see that. He said it like an apology. That choice of words made me feel sick. I kept my eyes on him and nodded slow. So you planned it, I heard myself sound cold. Evan swallowed and looked at the floor for a beat. Then he looked up and finally told me the partial truth. She's his mother, he said it like a fact I owed him. She wants to be back in his life, his fingers rubbed together once. I stayed still because I didn't trust my legs. I waited for the part he was avoiding. Where has she been? The question came out flat. Evan's jaw flexed like he bit down on anger. That's not your business, he lifted his chin at me. And that's when it clicked, he was cutting me out on purpose. I stepped closer and kept my voice low and sharp. I raised him, the words came out raw. Evan flinched then recovered too fast. You helped, he corrected and his eyes stayed steady. I stared at him and felt my face heat. Sincerely, I wanted to slap that calm right off him. Instead I pointed at the email again. You wrote that I'm a risk, I said and my voice shook. Evan exhaled and rolled his shoulders back. It's temporary, he tried to sound reasonable. Until things settle, his mouth formed careful words. That until felt endless and he knew it. I heard Miles's door creak behind us. I didn't turn because I couldn't handle his eyes. Evan turned though, and his tone softened instantly. That switch made my skin crawl. Miles stepped into view with his blanket bunched in fists. He looked at me first, then at Evan. What's happening? His voice came out small and brave. Evan's silence answered him before I could. Miles stepped forward and grabbed my sleeve with both hands. His nails pressed through the fabric, and he wouldn't let go. Evan lifted his arm like he could separate us with one motion. I shifted my body and kept Miles behind my hip. Hey, I crouched and met Miles at eye level. My voice came out too soft and I hated that. Nothing is your fault, I held his gaze until he blinked. Evan made a sharp sound through his teeth, and it cut me. Stop feeding him lies, Evan's finger snapped toward the hallway. Miles flinched like the finger was meant for him. I stood up slow because fast would scare Miles more. Evan's face stayed calm and that calm felt rehearsed. I lifted my phone and opened the invite again. The call button sat there like a trap. Evan extended his hand, palm open like a judge. Give me that, his voice stayed low and it was worse. No, I kept the phone close to my chest. Evan's eyes narrowed and he took a half step. Miles slid closer to me and his breath hitched. Evan noticed then smiled like he won a point. Fine, Evan turned and walked toward the kitchen. He called over his shoulder, Miles, come here. Miles didn't move, he stared at me instead. I nodded once and he inched forward like he was crossing ice. Evan tapped his phone and put it on speaker. A few tones rang out, then a woman answered quick. Hi Evan, her voice sounded warm and it made me furious. Evan angled the phone away from me anyway. A second voice joined, crisp and practiced. Thank you for joining, the tone belonged to a school staffer. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Evan pointed at me without looking, like a silent warning. Who else is on? I asked and my voice shook. Evan's hand sliced down, telling me to stop. The staffer paused, then resumed like I was background noise. Primary guardian is present, that wording landed like a bruise. The woman spoke again, brighter now. I'm Miles's mom, she let the title sit there. Evan made a little humming sound of approval. Miles looked toward the phone like it could see him. I stepped closer to Miles and touched his shoulder. He leaned into me for half a second, then pulled back. That tiny retreat wrecked me because I understood it. He was trying to be loyal to both sides, and it was impossible. The staffer outlined steps and goals in clipped phrases. I heard supervised visits and then unsupervised right after. My pulse spiked and I forced my face to stay still. Evan nodded like this was a routine errand. She's been stable for months, Evan added it like proof. The woman laughed lightly, like they shared a private joke. I watched Miles's eyes flick between us, trying to decode tone. Have you ever seen a kid learn fear in real time? I leaned down and whispered near Miles's ear. You don't have to answer anything, my breath trembled. Evan snapped his fingers once, sharp and impatient. Don't coach him, his mouth barely moved and it still cut. The woman asked Miles, can you say hi? Miles froze and his shoulders rose like armor. I started to speak and Evan raised his hand at me. Miles swallowed hard then whispered, hi, into the air. Oh sweet boy, her voice softened almost syrupy. Evan watched Miles with a small smile, pleased with himself. I hated that smile more than I can explain. And the woman added one detail she shouldn't have known. You still do the strap thing when you're nervous. Miles's head snapped up and his face went pale. My stomach turned because that was real knowledge. Evan glanced at me like he just proved a point. I stepped in front of Miles, blocking the phone with my body. Who told you that? My voice came out too loud. Evan grabbed my wrist and squeezed, not enough to bruise. Enough to remind me he could. The staffer cut in, professional and firm. Please keep this calm, the words felt aimed at me. Evan released my wrist like he was being generous. Miles stared at my hand and my shame burned hot. The woman kept going, faster now. I want him this weekend, no hesitation, no build-up. Evan nodded again, then glanced toward Miles like a salesman. Miles's eyes filled and he shook his head once. You will be fine, Evan crouched near Miles too close. He pointed at me, then back at the phone. Go stand with her, he said it like instructions for a dog. Miles didn't move and Evan's patience cracked. Miles, Evan's voice hardened and his eyes flashed. Miles rushed to me and gripped my shirt like a lifeline. The staffer went quiet and I heard the woman inhale. And then Evan said the thing that changed everything, quietly, clearly. She's not your mom. I hit the speaker button and ended the call mid-sentence. The sudden silence felt louder than the voices. Evan stared at the dead screen like I'd committed a crime. Miles made a small sound that didn't even feel human. Evan reached for Miles and Miles backed into my side. I put one arm across Miles's chest, gentle but firm. Evan's hand stopped in the air, then dropped fast. The pause told me he was calculating his next move. You can't do that, Evan's voice stayed even, almost polite. I pointed at Miles's face and forced Evan to look. He's shaking, my words came out clipped and ugly. Evan blinked once, then looked away like a coward. Miles pressed his forehead into my stomach and held on. I rubbed the back of his head with 2 fingers. I wanted to promise everything would be okay, but I couldn't. So I said the only honest thing I had. I'm here, my voice cracked on the second word. Miles nodded like he understood, then tightened his grip. Evan's mouth twitched like he hated hearing it. He took a step closer and I braced. Evan lowered his voice and angled his body toward me. Give him to me, his hand hovered, controlled and steady. I didn't move because moving felt like losing. Miles whispered no, and Evan's eyes sharpened. You're upsetting him, Evan tried the calm parent routine again. I let out a short laugh that sounded bitter. You upset him, I kept my eyes on Evan's hands. Evan's nostrils flared and he finally dropped the mask. You don't have rights, he said it fast like practiced. The word rights hit harder than Mom ever did. Miles lifted his face and looked at Evan with panic. Evan saw that look and didn't stop. I did something I'm not proud of. I pulled out my phone and started recording. My thumb shook so bad I almost hit the wrong button. I held it down by my thigh and kept talking. Say it again, I kept my tone flat. Evan stared at me, then smiled like he caught me. You're not his mother, he didn't raise his voice once. Miles flinched like Evan slapped him. Miles's breathing went fast and shallow. I guided him toward his room without pushing. Evan tracked us with slow steps, like a security guard. I blocked the doorway with my body and held my ground. Go sit on your bed, I tried to sound normal. Miles obeyed, but his eyes never left my face. Evan leaned into the doorway and crossed his arms. He looked pleased and that made me feel sick. You're going to confuse him more, Evan's tone turned smug. I didn't answer because I needed to think. My brain felt scrambled, but one idea stayed sharp. I needed proof that wasn't just my word. I walked back to the kitchen and opened the school app. My hands moved on autopilot, fast and shaky. I took screenshots of every change I could see. Each click felt like grabbing air before I drowned. Evan watched me and tapped his foot in a slow beat. You're spiraling, he said it like a diagnosis. I wanted to scream, but I kept my mouth shut. If I yelled, he would use it. I called the school's main line and put it on speaker. A receptionist answered with a bright voice I couldn't match. I gave my name and asked about Miles's file access. The pause on the other end lasted too long. "I'm sorry," the receptionist sounded careful now. "I can only speak with the primary guardian." I stared at Evan while she said those words. Evan lifted his eyebrows like, "See, I told you." I swallowed hard and tried again. "Is there a note that I'm not allowed?" The receptionist hesitated, then lowered her voice. "There is a restriction listed," she admitted, and my skin went cold. "What kind of restrictio?" And my voice came out thin. "I can't read it to you," her tone stayed firm. Evan leaned closer to the speaker like he enjoyed it. I ended the call because I couldn't take one more second. Evan snapped, "Don't hang up on them." I stared at him because the audacity was unreal. "You put a restriction on me," my words came out steady now. Evan's face hardened and he didn't deny it. "You left me no choice," he said it like I forced him. I laughed again and it sounded rough and mean. "You planned this for weeks," I pointed at his phone pocket. Evan's eyes flicked down then back up. "I planned what was necessary." Evan stepped closer. His voice stayed quiet but the threat sat under it. "Pack your stuff tonight," he said it like a schedule. My heart dropped because he was already evicting me. I walked into the bedroom and grabbed my duffel. I moved fast because slow would turn into begging. Evan stayed in the doorway and watched, arms crossed. I could feel his eyes on my back like a hand. I shoved clothes in without folding, just grabbing. My fingers kept missing zippers because they trembled. Evan let out a small chuckle, which made me see red. "I guess you finally understand," he muttered. I spun toward him and pointed at the ring on my hand. "So this was fake," my voice rose, then I pulled it down. Evan's eyes stayed flat, no warmth at all. "That was for stability," he said, and I nearly choked. "Stability for who?" I asked, and my hands shook. Evan shrugged like it was obvious. "For Miles," he said the name like a shield. My stomach turned because he used Miles as cover again. I marched back to the kitchen and opened that email thread. I scrolled until I found a line I missed before. It mentioned court filing attached with a date and time. I read that date twice and my blood ran cold. Evan saw my face and stiffened. He reached for the laptop and I yanked it away. "Don't," one word, and my voice didn't wobble. Evan froze then breathed out slow. "You were never supposed to be in the middle." Evan lifted his hands like he was explaining a mistake. I stared at him and felt something break cleanly. I wasn't in the middle, I was being removed. I tapped the attachment and it opened in a viewer. A petition, a signature, a request for an emergency order. It listed me as an unrelated adult, and it stung. Then I saw the accusation and my vision blurred. It claimed I was unstable and interfering. It said I alienated Miles from his mother. I sat down hard because my legs quit on me. Evan watched me like a scientist watching a reaction. "You wrote that?" My voice came out flat and dead. Evan didn't answer right away, which was an answer. "I had to protect the reunification process," he finally said. Hearing him say process made me want to throw up. I stood up and walked straight to Miles's door. I knocked once then opened it slow. Miles sat on the bed with his hands clenched tight. He looked at me like he'd been waiting for a verdict. "Are you leaving?" His voice shook on the last word. My chest tightened so hard it hurt to breathe. I forced my face into something steady. "I'm not abandoning you," I told him, and it felt like a promise and a lie. Miles slid off the bed and hugged me hard. His arms squeezed like he could hold me in place. I held him back and stared over his head at the wall. I didn't cry because crying would scare him. Evan appeared in the doorway again, silent and looming. "Time," he said it like we were on a timer. Miles pulled back and looked at Evan with anger. That anger looked too big for his body. "You can't make her go," Miles's voice went sharp. Evan crouched down and put on the calm face again. "She's going to cool off," Evan said, soft and fake. Miles shook his head hard, like he refused the script. I stepped between them because I had to. "Stop talking like I'm a tantrum," my words came out low. Evan's eyes flashed, then he looked past me. He was looking for his advantage again. Evan pulled his phone out and started typing fast. I saw the screen for a second, one word stood out. "Police." My pulse kicked and my mouth went dry. Evan didn't look guilty, not even a little. Are you calling them on me? I asked. Evan didn't stop typing. You're refusing to leave, he kept his tone mild. I realized he was building a story in real time. I backed into the hallway and kept my voice steady. I'm leaving, the words tasted like ash. Evan stopped typing and lifted his eyes at me. He wanted me gone without drama, and he wanted the wind. I walked back to the bedroom and finished packing. My hands moved on pure instinct now. I slid the ring off and set it on the dresser. That small clink felt like a door closing. I went to the kitchen and grabbed my keys. Evan blocked the front door with his body. You're not taking Miles, his tone stayed firm. Miles appeared behind me like a shadow, listening again. I didn't argue. Because arguing wouldn't help Miles. I crouched and looked Miles in the eyes. This is not goodbye, my voice shook and I hated it. Miles swallowed hard and nodded like he was forcing himself. Evan's phone buzzed with a new message, then another. He glanced down and smiled, quick and private. I saw a preview flash on the screen, just a few words. Can't wait to see him, and my stomach flipped. I pointed at his phone. That's her, my voice came out steady and cold. Evan's smile vanished, then returned even wider. She's already in town, he said, and it felt like the final knife. I walked out the door before I did something stupid. My hands shook so bad I dropped my keys once. Miles ran to the doorway and yelled my name. Evan grabbed his shoulder and Miles fought him. Let go of him, my voice cracked loud and ugly. Evan tightened his grip and pulled Miles back. Miles screamed stop, and the sound shattered me. Evan didn't release him until Miles went still. I drove to a friend's place and sat in the car shaking. I replayed the recording and listened to Evan's words. Each playback made my chest tighten then harden. I wasn't going to vanish quietly. The next morning I walked into a family law office. My hands still trembled but my voice stayed clear. I played the recording and showed the screenshots. The attorney's face changed, and that change gave me air. She asked one question that cut through everything. Have you been the primary caregiver? I answered yes without thinking, then corrected myself. Yes, every day, I said, and my voice didn't break. We filed for emergency visitation that afternoon. I signed papers with a pen that kept slipping. I hated how official it felt, like love needed stamps. Still, I signed because Miles deserved a fight. Evan texted me while I sat in the courthouse hallway. You're embarrassing yourself, the words made me shake with rage. I didn't reply because silence was safer. Then another message came through, and it told the truth by accident. He already has a mom again. No mention of my name, no kindness, no hesitation. Just replacement clean and final. I stared at that line until my vision blurred. When the judge called my case, my legs felt heavy. I stood anyway because I had no other choice. I told the facts without begging, even when my voice wobbled. And when I finished, I looked down at my shaking hands. The judge granted temporary contact while the case moved forward. Not custody, not forever, just time that couldn't be erased overnight. I walked out with a stamped order and a pounding heart. Because now Evan had to explain himself in public.